It's time. No more precursors. No more prequels. No more build-up. This is the end game. I'll see you in 3 hours. MJ Knight, out.
Right, you know how this shtick works by now. You have the option of the spoiler-free review, and we're now on the spoiler review. And I would just like to make this clear, because I know there's a consensus going around saying with hashtag don't spoil the endgame. So this has to be said. If you go and complain afterwards that I've spoiled it for you, the title is self-explanatory. It's a spoiler review. If you go and complain afterwards, it's not my fault. I gave you the chance of 5 seconds to click off or check out the spoiler-free review in the description below. So, if you complain afterwards, it's on you, folks, not me. So, alright, that was your chance. Okay. We pretty much pick up from where we left off last time with Stark and Nebula trying to return home from deep space aboard Rocket Raccoon's ship. And it's nice just to sort of see Stark just trying to have some sort of camaraderie with Nebula by playing games, helping to fix the ship, and we see the clip of him making these personal video diaries with his helmet. I think it's not necessarily in a way to send messages, it's just to record personal thoughts just to keep your sanity, just so that you have something to shoot for. It's like I say, it's just to collect your thoughts. Captain Marvel being the one to rescue Iron Man from deep space, where she's able to go into space without the need of a helmet, can move way faster than the speed of sound. That's a no-brainer. That is something that she would do based upon what I know about the character. The reunion, well, unsurprisingly, Pepper is absolutely overjoyed just to see Tony back, and there's still some sort of conflict going on between Rogers and Stark Stark's still kind of bitter, saying, why didn't we just go ahead with the Ultron program the way I wanted to do it, obviously without Ultron screwing things up. And there's a 5-year period after Thanos is killed by Thor properly this time, because Thor literally takes Thanos' advice. He aims for the head this time. Like I say, we have this 5-year period where we see all the different Avengers in different places in life just trying to go about day-to-day routines, just something just to keep them going and just trying to move on. And Stark finally gets what he wanted. He actually becomes a father. And the idea of the charismatic and charming playboy actually become a family man, it's actually very touching. To see a guy that was a very broken man with a very confident facade, or his confidence was the facade, whichever your preference, to be able to have someone else to show love and affection to, aside from Pepper, that he's setting up his own legacy for later in life, and just to see this slightly softer and more paternal side of Tony Stark, it's actually very charming and very heartwarming. Because the character can be an ass on occasion, but he's a lovable ass. And to see this side of him is actually quite refreshing. And I do like the little back and forth between Tony and his daughter Morgan, you know, he will say I love you to her, she says I love you 3,000. He's like, oh. So that's actually very touching. Seeing Steve Rogers go off to a local mission and just talk with survivors of the decimation, which is what that was referred to. And you can tell in Cap's eyes he's really still hurting. He really doesn't know how to move on. And then we start getting given the prospect of how to undo everything by using the quantum realm technology from Ant-Man and the Wasp, whereby they were able to convert it into a means of time travel. Now, you could argue in some way this is kind of a lazy way, because if you're doing a movie that is about time travel specifically, then it's not so much a crutch. But when you're backed into a corner, not knowing how to fix a problem, it's almost like a get out of jail free card. It's a little bit of a lazy way to do it. And Marvel, I love your movies, but you took a shot at Back to the Future. Buttheads. The way that Scott Lang goes and says, we just have to make sure we don't interact and talk with our past selves or bet on future sports events. And Tony Stark just comes out and says, those are the events of Back to the Future. And then further on, where they go to say, we cannot change the past because our past will become our futures. And then Scott says, so Back to the Future is nothing but a big bunch of bullshit? And I'm like, screw you, movie. It's like, you were doing well. You were doing well, and then you had to take a jab at one of the greatest trilogies of all time. And then they had to make a Troy joke, which I would like to state for posterity, I am not a fan of President Troy. I am not. But it's getting really, really old, generic, lame, and tired to constantly keep making jokes, because when you make jokes about him, you're actually giving him more attention, when what you should be doing is not take pot shots at him at all. That's just my take on it, because if you want something to be deflated, you don't feed it. Because I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, Troy jokes, shots at digs at Back to the Future. See, movie, I would have given you a score of 9. I would have given you a 9, but because you made a tired joke that it might have been cute 3 years ago, but it's 2019 now, it's really getting old, dated, and tired. Make up something new. And like I say, I want to state for the record, I am not a fan of President Troy. I'm not. It's not my cup of tea. But neither are a lot of people. I just think, it's, like I say, it just gets really dated and tired when you make the same jokes. A joke is funny. What was it you said once when? First time is funny, second time is silly, third time is a spanking. She'll probably correct me. Love you, Win. What else? What else? It was an interesting way. Now this is where we do start to get into spoiler territory. The way that Black Widow is written out by having her sacrifice herself for the Soul Stone. the way that Thanos sees his future self from 2014 and how he's going to wreck everything up by 2024, because it moves on 5 years from 2019, and how he manages to travel to the future via the quantum realm and is going to repeat what he did on both Earth and Titan. Now, by this point, they've gotten all of the Infinity Stones back, and it's actually Hulk that's able to take the brunt of the energy that's in these Infinity Stones in their own makeshift Infinity Gauntlet, which is basically an expandable Iron Man glove. And it's actually cool to see the addition of Professor Hulk at long last, where it's Hulk's body but with Banner's mind. And I feel like it's kind of taking some unintentional inspiration from the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes animated series, where Hulk is when I say he's a lot more intelligent, he's still got a bit of an anger problem, but Banner is allowing him to remain, except for, one day a month where he's let out to go fishing. But in this, Professor Hulk is actually a character from the comics, where it's the intelligence of Banner, but with the Hulk's body, and Banner is actually now seeing Hulk as something that should be useful and not be seen as an ailment or as an enemy to be threatened with. And it's actually cool to see Banner being given a lot more to do. And for once, the Hulk actually having a much more integral involvement with the story rather than just being the Heavy. Although the Heavy and the Hulk, although the Hulk and the Heavy from Team Fortress 2, that would be interesting. Like, who touched my gun? Hulk smash. Make it happen, people. Make it happen. What really, really stung was the way that the last fight was over with. It is fitting that Iron Man was the one to kick off the MCU, and Iron Man is the one to do away with Thanos. But that victory comes at a very, very high price, because the Infinity Stones graft to him, and after Thanos says, quote, "I am inevitable," Stark merely responds in kind, "And I am Iron Man." Snaps his fingers, Thanos' army is reduced to dust, but in the bargain of it, it mortally wounds the Iron Avenger, and I have to say, Robert Downey Jr., he sold Stark's death. And for me, that was... wow. It's going to be difficult down the road with the MCU because, and this is purely my mindset and perspective, mentality, give it whatever label that you deem worthy. And this is how I feel. There is no MCU without Iron Man. Iron Man is one of those pillar characters that draws people in. Sure, people will want to come in and see future Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and rightfully so, because those movies, on their own merits, are decent franchises within the MCU. But without the original 6, from Black Widow, Hawkeye, Cap, Thor, Hulk, and Iron Man, it's going to leave the MCU feeling very empty. Because whenever there would be another Avengers movie, because there hasn't been a brand new Iron Man movie since 2013, and we still want an apology from 2013 for Iron Man 3. I appreciate the character of the Mandarin had to be handled in a very different way, considering the times that we're in, but the way that they handled that character was very misguided and poor. But whenever there would be an Avengers movie, you knew that you were going to see Tony Stark again, because it was always such a treat and such a joy to see Robert Downey Jr. come and reprise his role, because there is something charismatically charming and magnetic about his personality as Tony Stark. Because most of the time when he is playing Tony, you feel like it's coming from a place of authenticity. It's very natural. He is not acting. He is just being Tony Stark. Now this little bit will be lost upon some people, but Jim Cornette said something in 2004 on the Monday Night War DVDs describing Ric Flair, Mick Foley, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, is that wrestlers get over with the audience when they're just being themselves. The audience love these wrestlers because that's who they are. And I feel like you could take that analogy and context with Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. The people go to see him in the Avenger movies and Iron Man movies, and when he makes cameos and guest parts in Spider-Man Homecoming and Captain America Civil War, they go to watch these movies because he is who they want to see. Now, I don't know the story of whether Robert Downey Jr.'s contract was up and he didn't want to renew it, or Marvel didn't want to renew it. Because there are some situations where the actor doesn't want to do it anymore, or the studio did and they just respect his wishes, or the actor still wants to do it, but the studio wants to move on and do other things, and they don't have a new contract for them. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised, say, by 2022 or 2023, when the new movies don't start doing so well and it comes up for a new Avengers movie, and they basically roll up to Robert Downey Jr.'s front door and say, will $600 million cover it? Because money talks. And the two basic primary functions of a movie is, number one, it is to entertain people, but equally as so, it's there to make money. And that is what I say, no Iron Man, the MCU's done. That's my opinion. If you don't agree, that's cool. I got no problem with that. Let's have a conversation, let's have a dialogue with it. As I mentioned in the no spoiler review, Alan Silvestri's score is just masterful. It's on the same plane level as that of Sir John Williams. I know I keep calling him Sir John Williams even though he is an American composer, but you know, it's got a nice tagline, Sir John Williams. The score is very impactful, from the final battle to the very moving and touching scene with Tony Stark dying and to seeing his funeral. And I like some of the callbacks to the first Iron Man, where Happy Hogan is talking with Morgan Stark, and he's asking her, because I know what Happy Hogan's trying to do. He's just trying to comfort his former boss's daughter, because Morgan's only 5 after the events of the Endgame, and she happens to say, "I want a cheeseburger," and Hogan just says, Your dad liked cheeseburgers. I'll get you as many cheeseburgers as you want." And the other nice, touching callback to the first Iron Man movie is the framed, miniaturized arc reactor on top of the reef that says, "Proof that Tony Stark has a heart." And he does. I did have a fear that when it was announced that some of the most of the actors' contracts were coming up, I'm like, please don't be Stark, please don't be Stark. I mean, I thought it was going to be Captain America that was going to snuff it, because Chris Evans had publicly said he had finished wrapping up on his 8th Marvel movie, and this was it for him. I thought, oh, that's going to suck. But when it was Tony Stark that made the sacrifice, I'm like, aww. I was like, that's my, Stark was the main reason I kept coming back to these Marvel movies, because it's Robert Downey Jr., It's in a similar vein to, with Christopher Daniel Barnes on Spider-Man the Animated Series. You came back to watch that show because of the way that he portrayed Spidey, just did it in such a great way. And Robert Downey Jr. was the main reason you kept coming back to the MCU movies. And like I say, if it's a simple case of he didn't want to renew his contract and he wanted to go off and do other things, then I don't like it, but I have to respect it. Or if it was a case of he wanted to continue on, but the studio wanted to move on and do other things, I don't know, Marvel. I feel like you're kind of shooting yourselves in the foot with that one. The way that Captain America ended his story, because of the art of time travel, he actually went back into the past and actually allowed himself to have that life that Stark talked about in Age of Ultron, where we get to go home to our families. And he did the one thing that he had been wanting ever since the first Avenger. Because it was apparent in this movie throughout, he misses Peggy Carter to the point that he's practically pining for her. And the fact that he knows he could actually go back in time and actually live his life out in the past with the one woman that he loved more than anything than life itself, he's like, ooh, gimme. And then to see Cap come back around up to the present as a very distinguished Steve Rogers, now probably into his hundreds, and he's passing on the shield to Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon, that he's now going to be Captain America. I felt like that was a natural passing of the torch. Why Bucky didn't go with him so he could go live his life out in the past, I don't know. I mean, he could have easily done that. But it is what it is. Like I mentioned with the no spoiler review, the CG is the best that I've seen for a while. I did like the fact that Iron Man's new suit was more or less a very faithful callback to the original Mark III from the 60s. Where, I mean, it was kind of referenced in the first Iron Man movie, but not as detailed, to where it was basically taken from the comics and actually had more of a metallic look to it. So it had like the full golden limbs on the red torso. It looked a little more comic book authentic, for lack of a better description. So CG, probably the best it's ever been. Same thing with Hulk. I don't think he's ever looked as good as before. And they did kind of... In fact, they just did. They straight up ripped off from Back to the Future Part 2, where they go into the past to retrieve the Infinity Stones. They're working around the events of not only Guardians of the Galaxy, but also the first Avengers movie, without trying to interact with themselves in that time. And unfortunately, Cap interacts with Cap, saying, I could do this all day. And it's like, yeah, I know. So I find it amusing that they take a dig at Back to the Future, but then they'll actually use elements from Back to the Future Part 2, where I'm thinking, movie, you're contradicting yourselves there a little bit. There's a little bit of hypocrisy going on there. Like I say, had it not been for those little discrepancies, I would have given writing a 9, but I think writing's only going to be for like a 7. Because you use a Troy joke, which is like, ugh. And, to state once again, I'm not a fan of the guy. I really am not. But using, references to that president, it's just very tired, repetitive, generic. It's just like you're beating a dead horse. And it's not funny. It's like Win said, first time is funny, second time is silly, third time, just stop. It's probably the first major decent MCU movie since the first Iron Man. Now, in the context of that, am I to say that every single Avengers movie before this were terrible, and all the others, we exclude Iron Man 3, because Iron Man 3, To say that the first 3 Avengers movies were terrible, no, that is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you were to compare this movie with the first Iron Man, where the dialogue is decent, the pacing is fluid and natural, and to where the payoff is amazing and you want to go back for more, that's why it has the same sort of feeling as the first Iron Man movie, because this is something that I've said from time to time, but I don't think too many people know. When Iron Man originally came out in 2008, I saw it 5 times at the pictures, because it was that good. And I did actually go to see Iron Man 2 6 times, because with me, I just like to break personal records of mine. It's one of my many little foibles and quirks in life, It's what makes me me. But that movie was worth seeing multiple times because, well, it's Iron Man. What's not to like? Iron Man 3? Ugh, no. I only ever saw that once at the theatre, and that was enough. It's like trying to justify seeing Jurassic Park 3 multiple times. Like, why? Why would you want to watch that multiple times at the box office? But, yeah. A very emotional end to the Infinity Saga of the MCU. Many have signed off. Whether we will ever see Tony Stark again in the MCU, I'd like to believe that we will. But do it in a way whereby it doesn't cheapen his sacrifice for what it meant to the story, and at the same time, it allows him to come back in where he's just able to come back in. Because, it's like I say, without Iron Man, there is no MCU. Some may say, well, I think you're wrong. That's your opinion. I just think when you have an asset or a commodity of Tony Stark that is clearly the biggest cash cow that there is for the MCU, would it not make more logical sense to try and use that to its fullest potential? I mean, that's just me talking. It's like if you have two brands of sneakers for a sneaker company. Let's call it the Wind Supply. So like Wind the Rogue has her own sneaker shop. She has the one set of sneakers that's reasonably affordable to make. So let's say, for the sake of discussion, it costs about $40 to make. Sells it for more or less the same price, but she's able to make back the budget because it just sells by the bucket load. Yet she'll make one that costs a little bit more, but it doesn't sell so much, and as such she loses profit. You go with the one that's going to make you more money. And I feel like with Iron Man's absence in the MCU from this point on, I think it's going to be detrimental to Marvel Studios, because to my understanding, not too many people went to see Captain Marvel. Even though they go and say, well, it did big numbers at the box office, yet most people that are on Twitter that have been uploading... Hello, Watch. That have been uploading photos to their Twitter showing how empty the theaters are. That doesn't sound like a blockbuster franchise to me. Now, for context, that's not me having a dig. That's just me calling it right here. Calling it right down the middle. That's being objective. If I was being cruel, i.e. subjective, I'd say it would suck. But because I haven't seen the movie, I don't get to say that. I am merely commenting on the fact that most people that have gone to see it either think it's okay or they didn't like it. I haven't gone to see it, and I'm probably not likely to go see it. Mainly because I feel like Ms. Larson's comments were, when promoting the movie, it was unwarranted and unprofessional, particularly with regards to what she had said at an awards ceremony. And I'm not going to be repeating what she said because, well, I like to stay away from most things controversial, but I'm merely stating that when you're promoting a movie, or if you have been signed on as a specific franchise lead character, you have to try and stay as professional as you can. And when Bob Iger doesn't like this actress, and most of the actors for the MCU don't have a lot of time and patience for her. I mean, just look at interviews that she's in with Chris Hemsworth, Don Cheadle, and even Jeremy Renner. Now, whether this is a clever ploy just to get people talking about the movie, I don't know. But they don't look comfortable around her. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the shtick is, but I've rambled on long enough. I strongly recommend that you do go watch Endgame because, like I said in the preview, where I decided to keep the preview short because We know the build-up. We know what has come before this movie. You don't need me to tell you that. But it is a movie that has to be seen. And the ending. Damn. Is all I can say. Because there is a lot of an emotional weight to this flick. Probably more so than Infinity War. Because Infinity War was the first time they lost. This time, they win the ultimate game, but it comes at a price. And it's interesting. 7 years ago, with the first Avengers movie, Cap outright says to Stark, you're not the one to lay your life on the line or cut the wire. Basically saying you couldn't make the ultimate sacrifice. Tony Stark's response with this movie, hold my beer. If this truly is the end for Tony Stark in the MCU, and I like the fact that in the end credits you can actually hear hammers pounding, which is directly lifted from the first Iron Man movie where he's forging the Mark I suit. I thought that's actually very appropriate because the MCU began with Iron Man and it's essentially ending its biggest phase yet with Iron Man. But if this truly is the end for Tony Stark, until such time they find a creative way to get him written back in, because I think they will. If this truly is the end, then to Robert Downey Jr., thank you. Thank you for what you did as the titular character, and for my reason and many fans the world over for returning each time. Because to a lot of kids, he's their hero. Particularly if you look at one clip. This was whilst they were promoting Age of Ultron, I believe. Downey Jr. and this university student that makes cheap 3D printed prosthetic limbs for people that either had limbs lost or weren't born with limbs properly. They give this kid who was 7 years young a chance to actually just to have a prosthetic limb put on where the kid could have some normalcy. And the kid is also meeting his hero, which is Iron Man. It's like, do you know who it is? Iron Man. And you see Robert going, yes! Do you know what his name is? Robert. Great! I like how there's two cases from Stark Industries opened up. One is one of his Iron Man limbs from Iron Man 3, and the other is what the university student has actually come up with the 3D printed prosthetic limb. That kid is going to remember that for the rest of his life. And where Robert Downey Jr. is able to be more than just that character, where it can actually shine a light on someone's day when they need it the most, that's when they truly are a hero. And we know that Robert Downey Jr. enjoyed playing the character, because I was watching an interview earlier today with Howard Stern, so you kind of know how some of those interviews go. But he goes and says that he made the point of he needed this role for Iron Man. He needed to change his thought process after being in a very dark place for so long with addiction to substance abuse and what have you. He really wanted to get his life back on track. And Iron Man was that way forward. And when you consider how far Robert Downey Jr. has come since then, you know, look at what he could have potentially lost in a very dark time in his life to the point now where he has everything. You know, he has worked, scratched, and clawed for everything since the first Iron Man movie, and he absolutely deserves it. It's sad to see him go. If this is the end, then thank you very much. But if there is the off chance he will come back at some stage, because, like I said, people can deny this all they want to, there is no Marvel Cinematic Universe without Iron Man. It's just one of those things. It's like a Dragon Ball Z without Goku. They tried doing that with writing Goku out at the end of the Cell games and having it rest on Gohan's shoulders, and look how that turned out. I don't know. Like I say, I've rambled on long enough. Go see Endgame in theaters, and you will get your money's worth. And then some. Until then, folks, this is MJ Knight, signing off from Real Features.